2, 1. Hey, welcome back to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. I am your host, Justin Stoddard. More than excited about today's episode. I have someone here who's done some phenomenal things, and I'm confident that if you listen closely, it's going to inspire you to go on to do phenomenal things as well. Let me remind you that the purpose of this show is to help you think bigger. As you do, your activities in life will change. You'll realize that there's more possible for you. As you start to realize that, again, those activities will produce different results, which will then turn you into somebody different, and you'll have a greater impact on the world around you, which again is my passion, is helping people live lives of great impact. So with that being said, I'm excited to bring onto the show today, Damion Lupo. He's a best-selling author. He's actually written more than 11 books in personal finance and money. He's founded over 50 businesses, and he actually has a newest book release called Unicornomics. And that lays out the essential pieces required for anybody interested in building a $1 million or even $1 billion business. This man is legit. He has some great things to share with us on how to succeed as entrepreneurs, how to think more like business owners, and how to prepare ourselves for a bright future even after we're done working. So Damion, thank you for coming on the show today. Excited to have you on the Think Bigger Real Estate Show.
Hey, Justin, man, it's good to be here. I'm excited to think bigger with you.
Yeah, this is going to be fantastic. Talk to us a little bit about your background. I shared kind of some highlights. What would you say, Damion, kind of relevant to the audience of residential real estate agents, real estate professionals, this industry in general? Are there any other points of your bio that would maybe help people see like, hey, this guy kind of has a little bit of an understanding of the world that I live in?
Well, it's interesting because back in 1997, that's when I started really beyond just the labor jobs up in Alaska when I was a kid. When I moved to Arizona from the Arctic Circle. So I was dodging polar bears when I was up there, literally in the Arctic Circle. And then I moved down to Phoenix, and it was 80 below and then 70 above. And I thought, this is amazing. And I get to be a real estate agent. And that was my first like big boy job, like really legitimate job. I think I was just excited I wasn't frozen, but I also went into that space and I spent time there. And I did that a number of times throughout my real estate investing career. I was also an agent. And so I get that space. Like I've been there. It's not just a book I read from Gary Keller, who has amazing books, by the way. It was, I actually went out and did this stuff. So I definitely get it. I spent most of my time investing in real estate and starting companies. Like you mentioned, I've started over 50 companies. And Unicornomics, the book that I wrote last year was really based on all the learning there and what happens and how to do it successfully based on doing it unsuccessfully dozens of times. Because 50 companies doesn't mean 50 successes. It means a whole lot of learning. And maybe a few actually worked, which is really the truth. A few worked. And when we hear that, every 90% or 95% of businesses fail within 5 years, do the math. 50 companies means 40 plus of them failed, and they really didn't work. So you learn a lot. And that's what I did over the last 25 years, was start a lot of companies, learn a lot, hire a lot of people, make a ton of money. 2008, lost $20 million, basically went into the hole by 5 million. And learned how to recreate it by learning more who I was and that I wasn't just a balance sheet, because that's probably the biggest lesson. Everybody thinks that money is the solution, Justin. They all think, oh, if I have more money, it's going to work. My life's going to work. And they don't get it that it's not, but everybody wants to try it for themselves. So I did the same thing. And here I am realizing money is helpful because it's a tool, but gas by itself doesn't do anything except explode, which is the same thing as cash. You got to have a useful engine for it to run in.
Man, fascinating. I didn't realize prior to this conversation that you were actually a residential real estate agent. And what if, something that you said there, I think really stood out to me, Damion, is that, again, everybody pursues business because of they believe that the greatest outcome will be show up on their, on their bank statements. And I think what you've identified there, that I know you and I both are in agreement on, is that the greatest thing of both failing and succeeding in business is who you become in the process. And I would have to think that those failures that led you to lose 20 million and then be able to build it back in 4 years, right? And have over, 150 rental houses in 7 states in less than 5 years. That wasn't luck. That was the fact that you had paid the price to take the risks. You paid the price to learn and to grow, so that when you suffered the big loss, you were the person that could get it back quickly.
Well, and a lot of that stuff I did not knowing what I was doing, meaning I didn't know that I was going through that process. I was basically young and naive. And the value of doing things when we're young and naive is that we're naive. And we don't realize that we can't build the Great Wall of China in a week. So we go, here's my plan. My goals are this. And people that are bald and gray and 60 go, that's crazy. But you're like, whatever, you're just old. And so you just go do it. And that's what I did. I went out there and did these things, and I just worked my butt off. And I really, like, the first deal I did was crazy. I don't condone this, but I bought a house with my Visa card. I took out a cash advance, which is like the worst possible thing you can do with a credit card. And I went out and used it for down payment for a house, and took over a house that I had to rehab, and I knew nothing about rehabbing. So I went in there and learned how to electrocute myself and get high off paint fumes and flood a house and fall off the roof. And like, it was a bloody mess. Literally, I was bleeding everywhere. And it was because I was so into creating something better. I was selling insurance. So people would say, you had your own insurance agency when you were 20. You couldn't even drink beer, but you were selling people life insurance. And I said, you know what? This is not big enough. So in terms of thinking bigger, I looked at the most successful real estate agents that were in Arizona with farmers where I was at, and they were making like $1 million a year. That was what they were taking home. And I said, $1 million a year, that's nothing. I need something bigger. So in terms of thinking bigger, it was also a little nuts, because that was 20 years ago. And they told me, if you worked this business for 20 years, you could be making $1 million a year. And I said, yeah, but I want to do that next year. So at the time I read Trump,
I can't wait 20 years.
It's too long, and here we are 20 years later. I read Donald Trump's book, now President Trump. Back then, he's just a real estate guy. Right. And I said, you know what? Real estate's where it's at. And so I shifted, because I saw real estate as something that had huge potential. And I bought into the seminars. I bought into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I got so excited. I went out there and did this thing. And once I was in motion, like, I learned something, and then I went out and did it, and then I became it. And that's really the process, where you learn and then you do, and then you become. You don't just say, I'm going to will myself to being a successful billionaire. Like, that doesn't work. You literally have to get yourself in motion. We're human beings that do things. We don't just sit there and stare at the ceiling. Like, that's a dumb, the secret approach that doesn't work. You got to go beyond that. And so I just did that a lot, and I basically screwed everything up along the way. And that's how I grew. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people think they can avoid, is making the mistakes, having the pain. They go, I don't want to feel the pain. And I think, well, how are you going to grow? That's how you stretch. That's how you expand. So thinking bigger means doing things, means breaking things down and popping to a different level of consciousness and a different level of being, where you won't really be recognizable for a lot of people. And I think that also scares people, Justin, because they don't want to break away and lose all their friends. When you grow, you end up being a different person, and people will try to pull you back to their level of consciousness, because most people are lazy and they're like, I don't want to do anything different. I want to stay here. I like my football. I like my beer. This is America. Oh yeah. And I go, well, if you want to stay there with them, then don't listen to this. But if you want to go and pop out, you're going to find new people that are going to be at that level, and you got to be willing to expand into that new group. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in the current situation. You can't do both. Like, it just doesn't work, because you're going to have a conflict all the time.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Is it not only are you going to find new people, but I would even add that you have to find new people, right?
There's no other option. One
of the benefits of this show is that I get the good fortune to hang out with amazing people like you that elevate my thinking, and I'm not recommending to everybody that's watching this to create their own show so that they can have an excuse to have a conversation with someone like Damion. But I do think that there is some value in being very intentional about how can I build a network and how can I add value to successful people that would in turn cause them to pour into me, right? And to be even positioned to where I'm around their thinking, because it's osmosis, in the sense that you spend time with it and it starts to rub off on you without you necessarily even knowing it. And I agree that network has to change. And I think you have to be very intentional about what are the people that when I'm with them, all they do is complain about the situation that they're in, right? I've had to be intentional, like, I can't spend any more time with you, because it's always problem identification as opposed to solution identification. And I think, a good reminder for everybody here is that if you're a real estate agent, you're in the office, and there are people that want to sit and talk about what they're going to do, and or they're talking about everything that's wrong. You can't stay there. You have to separate yourself. You have to go create intentional masterminds with people that are moving and shaking and doing, if you want to be one of those people.
I give you a great example of what you're talking about that just happened to me last year. And it was actually a pretty devastating experience. I had my best friend of 10 years. I flew 3,000 miles to spend my birthday with him. And we had deep conversations. We wrote a book together called Reinvented Life. And we really were close. We traveled all over the world together. I went to visit him, And when I got to his place, we were isolated on this little Caribbean island. And I sat there with he and his wife, and I listened to them bitch and complain for a straight week. And I went, wow, I'm literally in the wrong space. And after that week of kind of being isolated, I said, hey, this really was a terrible week for me. And I don't know what happened. And I never heard from him again. And so what happened there is he was at a certain place in his life and wanting to just commiserate with his wife around the negative stuff instead of looking forward to the optimistic possibilities of thinking bigger and doing things. And I think he was looking backwards too much. He's a very sweet guy. But to your point about when you're just talking about, what you're going to do or complaining about what has already happened, you really are stuck. And that's not where I am. And so there was a tension, and the tension popped where I left. And ultimately that means I opened space for new people, new ideas, positive outcomes, just a totally different way of approaching everything. And it took literally severing a very important friendship and relationship. And I think that's really scary for people. Like, I wouldn't have thought that was going to happen in 2019. And yet it was the most important thing that happened, because it allowed me to move on past the negativity. Because truly, if you want negativity, every news channel has plenty of it. Like, it's unlimited. Or we can start going around to what you said. You talked about masterminds and people that are thinking bigger, and really the ones that are doing stuff. It's easy to tear down, like people attack Elon Musk, or they attack people that are getting things done. And I go, wow, really? Because nobody erects a statue for a critic. And that's what you are right now. You're a critic. This person's actually changing the world. And I don't think they give two flips. So what are you doing? Are you doing something that's worthy of being attacked, or are you the attacker? One's useful and one's a waste of energy and space on planet Earth.
Yeah. A couple points that stand out as you say that, Damion. Great thoughts, by the way. I love it. I think we sometimes underestimate the opportunity cost of having somebody like that in our life. They might not even be totally negative, but if they're not moving us forward, they're taking space of time and mind space of people who could be moving us forward, right? I think it's evaluating, again, not just, the activities that we're involved in, but again, the people that we're around. I had the good fortune of having Grant Cardone come on the show. This has been probably a couple months ago. And something that I was reminded of when you were talking, he says that, if you don't have any haters, if you don't have anybody like pulling at you, come back, or don't do that, or, jabbing at you, then you're not doing much. Like, if you have some haters, great, get yourself some more. He says, that's the sign of success, and I don't mean that in a polarizing way that you're out there to make people mad, but anytime you start moving forward, whether it be, your own business, your own life, an industry, you start to get people uncomfortable because that's not what they're used to. And they have to have some pushback. And I think being comfortable with pushing the envelope, not when it comes to ethics, but when it comes to innovation, when it comes to thinking bigger, if you're not getting some people that are uncomfortable, then you're probably not making a difference.
That's it. When I did a program about a week and a half ago, it reminds me of what you said about Grant. I did this program. I invited everybody. There was about 10,000 people I invited. And I had 2 people text me back and literally say, F you, why are you texting me? And I was thinking, dang, I'm inviting you to a program. I'm doing this for you. It's my gift. It's a 3-hour program. It's called Decade by Design. I was helping people understand how to design a decade consciously versus having this default 10 years, like maybe a lot of people had the last 10 years. And 2 people, it was the F-bomb. And I'm thinking, wow, haters. And they're like, they didn't even look at this thing. It was just like anybody that was texting them, they were going to middle finger. And I thought, man, your life is going to look worse in 10 years for sure, because your trajectory is definitely into the crapper. And but did it affect me? No, what happened is hundreds of people were experienced this process because I went out there into the wild and I gave the best of what I had. And people came back and said, you literally changed my life. You gave me insight. You gave me that, like what you said hit a chord, and I pivoted, 10 degrees, 1 degree, it didn't matter. It was worth it. So the haters, the F offers, like those people are out there. And when you do something, if you're a real estate agent, nobody's investing, and then you say, okay, I'm going to go do a deal, you're going to get haters. People are going to be like, ooh, it's scary. It's dangerous. Like, ooh, that's bad. Like, ooh, top of the market, like all this brain damage. And you know what? If you want to stay with them, if you want to have their life, in every real estate office, there's always somebody that's been there. They're like 70 years old and they've been there for like the last 50 years. And they're basically doing the same thing. They're on cruise control. If you don't step out, that's your life. Like, look at that. That is probably what your life is going to look like it's just, that's where you're headed because that's your trajectory. So I think you do have to step out and I love it. You got to have some haters. You got to have people that are just trying to pull you down. That tells you you're stepping outside of the norm. It really does tell you that.
Awesome, man. I want to hit on a couple points here. You talk about the foundational 15% that gives entrepreneurs an 85% likelihood of success. Talk to us about that.
So this principle came from Buckminster Fuller, who was probably the smartest person of the 20th century. Einstein said, "This is the smartest guy that I know." That wow. Kind of says a lot when Einstein says that. And Bucky, as we called him, talks about these principles. And so I wrote the book Unicornomics based on this principle that when you start anything and you start a business, there's a foundation. And if you get that first 15% right, because if you think of the entire business as the 100%, like the entire process you go through, the first 15 is setting up the framework. It's setting up the values. It's setting up your systems. It's setting up why you're doing this and the mission and everything that's involved. And so I think a lot of times we've heard mission, vision, values like this. It's like we're getting hammered by this, which is important. It goes way beyond that. When we're talking about real estate agents, for example, you can do a lot of things, but if you don't focus on the actual person and build the relationships with people, you're just going to be part of that noise that you talk about. It's noise. And honestly, you're going to be broke. So when we talk about the first 15%, it's a question of, are you going to spend the time up front or are you going to chase it? Because ultimately, if you do it up front, you have an 85% likelihood of being successful down the road with this thing. If you don't do it up front, it's like 95% likelihood you're going to fail. So wow. This first 15% it's everything. And people don't want to do it because they're so anxious. I got to get started. I got to sell something. And then you know what you look like? An Amway salesman. Hey, come buy my soap. And that doesn't ever work because nobody wants to be sold. They all want to buy. They all want to be in a relationship. And when you have something built on that foundational 15%, it gives you the structure to go out there where people are like, I love this. I want this. Please let me buy your thing.
So would you agree that 15% then is the mission, vision, values? Is that what I understood?
That's a part of it. And see, that's where people stop. They go, okay, I got a mission. I'm going to change the world. I'm going to plant trees. I got a vision for that. That's my mission is to clean the air. And my values are the environment is clean. Like this is, and then they go, cool, I'm good. And then they start trying to sell something. What they don't have is they don't have the right blueprint. They actually don't have it laid out. They don't have clarity on the map. Like they don't really go down into the details. They just, people tend to be very airy, like way up in the clouds, or they're too in the minutia with just the details. And so what I call a unicorn is a person that can do vision and details. And if you don't have that skill set, it's very weird to have that. You have to have somebody else that fills in that gap. And then you mesh them together. And Unicornomics has these 5 pieces in it where it really outlines every piece of that. And it gets down to the things that matter. Like when you're interacting with somebody, if you just send out a piece, like, okay, here's a good example. You have a house that you're listing and you put a cheap piece of paper in a flyer box. You're representing your brand. Who you are is a cheap piece of paper. And people go, yeah, but why would I spend 50 cents or $1 per sheet of paper? Well, why would somebody want to have you do anything for them and pay you $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 if you're cheap, if you're little, if you're scarce? And so it's thinking about all these things that represent you because nothing is neutral. Everything has meaning. And people don't think about it. They're thinking, oh, I only have this limited amount of money, but they're not thinking about the other side. How are people going to interpret what you're doing? That's who you are. What you do, how you show up, that's who you are to people. And you have to think about those things up front or have something that says, hey, here are the questions we need to ask, because how would you know? We don't know what we don't know. The book was meant to be the questions to pull those things out of you, because I think everybody listening and watching has the ability to do those things right if they even know what those things are.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because one thing that I'm concerned about that sounds a bit contrarian to what you're saying, but I think actually your book is a solution for it, which is you get a lot of agents who spend a year trying to figure out all this stuff without actually going out and creating any sales. And I see exactly what you're saying as well, is that you can't go out and create like haphazardly go talk to all your friends and family without actually thinking through like what makes me different from the other 10 real estate agents that they know. So there's this kind of fine balance between not overthinking and getting lost in analysis paralysis and actually going out and being thoughtful about how am I being received in the community and amongst those around me. And it sounds like your book in short order could help people really identify what those things are and move forward quickly so that they can, again, get out of analysis paralysis, yet show like it's kind of the best of both worlds, right?
It is, and people do this all the time. They say, okay, I'm gonna work on these things. I'm gonna work on my business card on my website, and they just do all this stuff, and then they're actually broke, right? They're not making any money. Right. So here's one of the thoughts. Nobody wants to do anything that requires footwork, meaning everybody wants to try to do things behind their desk. Well, that's great because you don't have any competition doing footwork. And here's a simple idea: get out in front of people. Like if somebody was brand new, I remember when I had my insurance agency. They said, okay, here's the thing. It's called X-dating, expiring car auto insurance policies. Call those people. So every day for 6 months, I was on the phone with a bunch of people that were calling and just talking to people every day for 3 hours every night. And so if you want to do the same type of thing in real estate, what could you do? You know what? Figure out where your neighborhood is and go and knock on doors and talk to people. Nobody does that. They all send postcards. Not a bad idea, but it's the only thing that they're doing. And so physically getting in front of people, I've never had anybody come up to me. I mean, like I'm somewhere and some agent goes, here's my card, call me. And I'm like, But if you came to my house and said, hey, this is my neighborhood, I'm a specialist here. And if I can help you in any way, if you're curious, if whatever, if you want to sell your house, if you want to look for a rental property, I'm your person. I'd be like, oh, so the next time I'm interested, I'm not going to Zillow. I'm like, you know what? That person showed up here. They obviously are beating the street. Like that's my beat cop. Like that's the person here. Who does that? Like nobody's out there. And if there are, there's so few that you don't have any competition. But what's the difference? It's that you're willing to get out from behind your computer because everybody's behind their computer. And so that's where all the competition is. That's where all the noise is. There's no competition at the front door.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And that's, you're right. It's a noisy world. Unless you're willing to do things that others aren't willing to do, then it gets pretty quiet and your voice really stands out.
There's no competition. I mean, I think Zig Ziglar said it or somebody, some smarter people than me. There's no competition at the top. There's truly, it's lonely sometimes, which is why you need masterminds and you need things like EO and these different groups where you can be amongst the other unicorns and centaurs that are out there that are like 1 in a million. Because you go out there and do those things. It's easier just to say, okay, yeah, you know what? I sent out a bunch of letters. I sent out some postcards. Yeah, okay, cool. You and 10 million other agents. And so you blend in, you get this pile of stuff and then we throw it away. But nobody throws it away if you actually show up at their door. Or, you know, then that's just one idea. I mean, just think about making a statement based on who are you and then show up with that. Because I don't know who you are because of a Photoshop postcard. Like that doesn't tell me crap. Right. What I do know is that if you're taking the time to come knock on my door, I tell you this much, you're going to be a millionaire by doing that because you're going to be the only one.
Yeah. Love it, man. Let's cover one other topic here. This is fun. It's great to have somebody that's done what you've done pouring into our industry. I appreciate this very much. You talk about how wealth is neither cash for cash flow, but something totally different, not taught in school, even business school. Please explain that.
So there's this misnomer that if you have a 401k with a big pile of cash in it, you're healthy and retired and you're rich, or if you go out and you buy some rental property and you have cash flow, that you're good, like that's wealth. And I go, okay, so if I hand you a 200 unit apartment building, you're thinking that's cool if it's cash flowing $10,000 or $20,000 a month. Most people watching would say, that sounds pretty good. And I would say, that's a terrible idea. And you go, wait, why? I get $20,000 a month. The problem is if I took it away, you would have no idea how to recreate it because you haven't built the confidence by going through the exercise of creating it. And so people think they just want this lottery ticket event. That's not wealth. Wealth is the experience by going through stuff. I was teaching with Robert Kiyosaki last year, and he made this comment. He said, you guys, wealth is not about money. It's literally going through the things. It's going through the process of learning. I go, man, I'm like a gazillionaire because I'm like going through every process. I am beating my brains and learning and stumbling and, oh, okay, that's the wrong way to do it. Oh, that's the other wrong way. And like all the wrong ways. And then I find one way. It wasn't the way that I found that worked that mattered the most. It was all the ways I learned. And I realized it didn't kill me. And I learned something in each of those things. So the next time I go out there and I'm wherever I am, instincts tell me which direction to go because I've been through it. You can't get instincts in a book. You can't get it on a YouTube. You have to go get the experience. And that's what builds the primary C. It's not cash. It's not cash flow. It's confidence because you've gone out there and done the work. That's where wealth lies. So I was thinking we were talking about when I lost all my money. It's like that old thing about Henry Ford. Somebody said, oh, you're rich. That's amazing, whatever. But you know what? What if we took it all away? And he said, I'd have it back in 5 years. And I remember thinking, that sounds terrible though. And I had a mentor years ago that said, you're probably all going to go broke. You're all going to lose all your money. And we're like, we're not, we're smarter than that. No, we all lost our money. Everybody lost all their money and we started over. And so again, we thought we had different ideas, but we had to go through it. And I made the money back. I created the wealth, but it was different. It was true wealth. It wasn't just another pile of cash. And I did it a lot faster than I did the first time because I understood the principles that needed to be used. It wasn't just a random free-for-all. And I think that that's the biggest thing we need to understand is you have to go through it to build the confidence. And then it doesn't matter. Take my money away today. I am not advocating for losing your money on purpose. But what I'm saying is it doesn't matter if you've built the skills because you're not going to be afraid. You're going to say, okay, market crashes. Everything I thought was right is wrong. I lose my money. Great. I'm going to go create it again because it wasn't a lottery event. I can actually recreate it. A 401k that takes you 30 years to build because you gave your money and just smoked a bunch of hopium, hope it works. That is a terrible plan because at the end of that thing, you're 50 years old and you go, crap, I hope I don't lose this because I don't have 30 more years. This is the problem with the 401k system that is totally opposite if we do what you advocate, which is, hey, agent, go, you're in the neighborhood, go buy some rental property. You know the market. You got an insider, like it's insider information. It's legal. Go do that. And then guess what? The market crashes. You don't care. Go buy some more properties. You're going to do it 10 times faster because you have the experience. 401ks that are passive investing where you don't build any skills and muscle are a terrible idea because you can't create it unless you have another 30 years. And by then you're dead.
Interesting. Fascinating. Now you've got some tools to help people with kind of the whole retirement picture. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Our entire system is set up so that Wall Street can get very rich at the expense of people with this 401k system and with IRAs. Like it's all built for one party to get rich. And so what we have is most people have IRAs and 401ks from previous jobs and they have this money and they go, well, what do I do? Well, I guess I'll just throw it into a mutual fund and maybe I'll get a robo thing. And instead of doing that, there's another option, and that is a self-directed retirement account. And what we do is we set up EQRPs. It's an enhanced qualified retirement plan. We're the only ones that do this in the country. Everything else that you might have heard of is an option it's kind of like the difference between a Rolls Royce and a Pinto. Like a Pinto will drive you around.
They're both cars. Yeah.
They're both cars. That's it. That's where it ends. And so this one gives you actual control where you can take your money, invest in real estate. Like you would never want to use a self-directed IRA to buy real estate as an example, because there's a tax. You're going to get taxed when you buy real estate that has debt with an IRA. Most people don't realize it. And it can be up to 37%. So you say, well, wait, I actually like real estate. I think I'd want to use my retirement money. So what do I do? There's one option. It's an EQRP. It's a checkbook for your money. You can invest in real estate. You get control of your money, and you can even borrow up to $50,000 out of it, which allows you to do things like personal development, where you grow as a human being. You can invest in courses and mentors and different things using this retirement account. Huge tool for people to really leverage and grow.
I'm going to put up here on the screen a place where people can go to learn more about this. I think what you're saying is going to resonate with some people. So let me put this up here. Maybe you can explain really quickly what they'll get. This little crawler here at the bottom of the screen. Talk to us a little bit about when they text EQRP to the number 72,000. What are people going to get from that?
So years ago, and every year I update this, I wrote a book called the QRP book. It's on qualified retirement plans. And I know that we're in an age where most people don't read anything. And so I thought, if I'm going to have something that people will read, what can we do? I boiled the book down to a 17-page report. So it basically boils down this entire book to the 10 things that you need to know. And texting this number is going to allow you to download that report. You can watch it read it on your phone or read it on your computer, but it gives you the report. It's basically the clip notes because everybody wants a hack. There's your hack.
I love it, man. I'm gonna leave that up there for just a minute while I ask you the signature question of the show, which is how we'll wrap up today. Which is, you're obviously a big thinker, Damion. You've done some big things, and now you're deep into contribution of helping other people kind of level up in a number of different areas. What does a guy like you, who is a big thinker, do to continue to think bigger, to continue to expand your possibilities?
The hardest thing to do is to teach what we think we know and to actually have it make any sense. And so in order for me to clarify my thinking and be rational and keep growing, there's a shift into more teaching. It's taking all the experience. It's not regurgitating somebody's seminar. It's literally taking my experiences and what I know based on what I've done and bringing those back, like I did a week and a half ago with Decade by Design, and taking all this information and condensing it. It's easy to complicate things. I mean, but to simplify things is brutal, and it takes a long time. It takes a lot of power, a lot of energy. So to contribute to people, it's simplifying all this complexity and giving them skills and tools. And that's what Black Belt Wealth is. That's the teaching element of what I do. It's teaching people how to be financially free so that they're not financially stuck. I mean, people are literally stuck with shackles that they've put on themselves, financial shackles. And the idea is to break those with empowering ideas and action, not just, oh, I feel good. Hey, that was a great weekend. You know, like we have these seminars or we read something. It's really giving people a way to take a step into a direction where the shackles are broken. And so that's the contribution. It's breaking these shackles from 1 million people.
It's powerful, man. That's good stuff, right? I think you learn the most when you teach, and when you can step outside of the fact of what do I have to share with anybody, and you realize how much you know and how much other people can benefit from your story. And you've absolutely done that today. I want to thank you for your willingness to come on the show with everything else you have going on, with the businesses you run, the clients you're serving, with the books you're writing and promoting. This is a big deal for us. So thank you for that. And I want to remind, it's been great. Thank you. And I want to remind everybody that my passion is to help you live a life of great impact. And it all starts with thinking bigger. So my invitation to all of us are 3 simple words, which are go think bigger. Thank you, Damion. Appreciate you, my friend.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks everybody for tuning in.